Don't have much time to read books? Want to make the most of your commute? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the What's It About channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a really towering work of Turkish literature today.
You really are.
Yeah, it's Ayşe Kulin's 2007 masterpiece, Veda, Eskişehir bir konak, which translates to farewell, a mansion in occupied Istanbul.
Right, and it is, it's just a phenomenal text to dig into. And to really do it justice, we're pulling from a totally massive stack of sources today.
Oh, absolutely massive.
Yeah, we've got academic literary analyses, some incredibly dense historiographical breakdowns, and these really fantastic socio-political commentaries that have scrutinized this book.
Like from every conceivable angle.
Exactly, every angle since it was published. Because we aren't just looking at the plot here, we are examining how this specific novel acts as a lens for, well, one of the most turbulent transitions in modern history.
Right, so our mission today for you listening is to figure out how a single domestic space, a grand, fading mansion in Istanbul, can act as this suffocating pressure cooker.
Yeah, a pressure cooker for the death of a 600-year-old empire.
And the deeply traumatic birth of a modern republic. We want to explore how the sweeping macro-level geopolitics of the 1920s didn't just happen in parliament buildings.
Or on battlefields.
Right, not just battlefields. It seeped under the doors of private homes.
Right.
It dictated who people could love, how they prayed, and even what music they played in their parlors.
And that domestic focus is so crucial because the historical shift from the Ottoman Empire to the Republic of Turkey wasn't just a simple change in administration.
No, not at all.
It was an absolute fundamental severing of an entire societal fabric. And by looking at the sources analyzing Kulin's work today, we're going to see how that severing left really deep psychological scars.
On the actual individuals caught in the middle.
Exactly.
And to you listening, I really want to emphasize that this isn't some detached clinical timeline. The sources we have make it very clear that this narrative is soaked in the author's own family history.
Which makes it so much more intense.
So intense. We are dealing with real secrets, deeply compromised morals, illicit romances, and that agonizing realization that the world you were raised to inherit
just no longer exists. Yeah.
It's gone. Which, I guess, plunges us directly into the temporal and spatial reality of the novel. The core narrative is tightly bound between the years 1920 and 1922.
With a pretty devastating epilogue set in 1924.
Right. And this is the absolute peak of the Allied occupation of Istanbul. The central motif that all the academic sources immediately lock onto is this concept of the Isirikir.
The captive city.
The captive city, exactly. The atmosphere described in these texts is incredibly claustrophobic. Like, if you try to picture Istanbul during those years, it's not the vibrant sovereign capital of an empire.
Not even close.
The Bosphorus, the very artery of the city, is just choked with the dreadnoughts of foreign fleets.
Yeah, enemy soldiers are physically patrolling the historic streets.
And the city is essentially cut off from its own hinterland in Anatolia, right?
Yeah.
It's held hostage by the Allied powers.
It is. And the Eskişehir motif, it operates on multiple levels in the literature. It is a physical captivity, yes, but the academic analyses emphasize that it triggers this profound spiritual and psychological paralysis.
Among the Muslim population specifically.
Right. The texts describe a people who are, quote, crushed, exhausted, and wretched. And this isn't just the fatigue of having lost to global conflict.
It was more than that.
Way more. It is the daily, visceral humiliation of occupation. The sources highlight how the occupying forces asserted their dominance not just militarily, but symbolically.
I noticed that in the source material, and it's deeply unsettling to read. The texts mention the deployment of Senegalese soldiers by the French forces.
Yes, which caused significant cultural friction.
Right, but more specifically, there are these agonizing details of foreign soldiers physically tearing the veils off Muslim women in the streets.
Yeah, that's a brutal detail.
It's awful. That isn't just an occupying force securing a perimeter. That is a deliberate, highly aggressive desecration of the population's cultural and religious identity.
It's designed to break the spirit.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that external desecration is the key to understanding what our academic sources term the mekan psikoloji ilişkisi.
The space psychology relationship.
Precisely. The author doesn't just leave that humiliation out on the streets of Istanbul. She brings it directly into the Beyazıt mansion.
Inside the home.
Inside the home. The mansion ceases to be a mere setting. It becomes a living, breathing microcosm of the dying state.
Imagine sitting in your own living room, surrounded by your family's heirlooms, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, and suddenly...
Foreign boots are kicking in your front door.
Exactly. The sources highlight these incredibly tense scenes where occupying troops force their way into the mansion to conduct searches. They track the literal and metaphorical mud of the occupation onto the family's pristine rugs.
And that intrusion is a direct parallel to the violation of national sovereignty. The sanctuary of the home, the marem or private sphere, is shattered.
Completely shattered.
Exactly as the borders of the empire have been shattered. The psychological trauma of the nation is experienced individually by the characters when they realize they cannot even guarantee the safety of their own bedrooms.
Which completely destroys the illusion of aristocratic invulnerability.
It wipes it out. And while the family is dealing with this external threat, the sources also point out that the mansion is fracturing from the inside.
Right, due to a crisis of dual authority. You have the traditional Istanbul government, still nominally headed by Sultan Vahdettin.
And then you have the revolutionary government forming in Ankara under Mustafa Kemal Pasha.
It's a total split.
It is. The Yönetim, the ruler and rule dynamics of the entire country are perfectly mapped onto the family tree in this novel.
So you have generations under one roof completely divided.
Completely. The older generation clings desperately to the authority of the palace, believing that survival lies in diplomacy and appeasement.
While the younger generation is secretly funneling resources to the nationalist resistance in Anatolia.
Yeah, the civil war is essentially happening across the dinner table.
There's a brilliant detail in the literary analysis that perfectly captures this shifting tide within the home. It's the music.
Oh, the musical instruments, yes.
Okay, let's unpack this for you listening, because the very soundtrack of their lives is modernizing. The sources point out how the soundtrack of the mansion begins to change. The women of the house slowly shift away from playing the traditional Ottoman oud.
And they begin playing Western instruments like the piano and the violin.
That auditory detail is just a masterclass in the mekan psychology ilişkisi we talked about earlier.
It really is, because the traditional music of the empire, which is microtonal, cyclical, and deeply tied to the Eastern classical tradition.
It's literally physically being replaced in their parlors.
Yes, by the structured, polyphonic, westernized rhythm of the New World. The cultural shift isn't just a political talking point. It is a sensory reality that permeates the air they breathe in that house.
It's the sound of modernization creeping in before the government even changes hands. It's fascinating.
It sets the stage so well.
It really sets the stage for the deep personal tragedies of the characters.
Yeah.
Especially the patriarch of the house. We have to talk about Ahmet Reşat Bey.
The last Ottoman minister of finance.
Yes, because his character arc is just brutal.
Brutal is the right word. Ahmet Reşat Bey is the absolute moral center of the tragedy here. He embodies the archetype of the dürüst bureaucrat.
The honest bureaucrat.
The honest bureaucrat, exactly. The socio-political commentaries stress that this is a man of unshakable integrity. He has served the state for decades and hasn't stolen a single carouse from the treasury.
He's squeaky clean.
Completely. He is dutiful, highly educated, and deeply patriotic, but he is caught in the most agonizing contradiction a statesman can face.
He is watching the system he swore his life to completely implode.
Yeah.
As the Minister of Finance in the Istanbul cabinet, he is under immense pressure from both the Sultan and the occupying Allied forces to sign the Treaty of Sèvres.
Which is an impossible position.
Right, and you listening probably know the geopolitical outcome of the 1920s, but the sources do an excellent job of putting us right in Ahmet's shoes. We have to feel the sheer gravity of Sèvres.
We do. To fully grasp his dilemma, we have to recognize what signing Sèvres actually meant.
It wasn't just a standard peace treaty.
Not at all. It was a total dismemberment of the empire. It partitioned Anatolia, handing vast territories to Greece, Italy, France, and Britain.
Just carving it up.
Yes, carving it up. It stripped the state of its military capacity and placed its finances entirely under foreign control. It was, for all intents and purposes, the legal erasure of Turkish sovereignty.
And Ahmet knows this.
Yeah.
He is a brilliant financial mind. He knows exactly what the terms dictate.
But his sworn duty to the palace requires his compliance.
Right. The Sultan believes that appeasing the allies is the only way to retain any semblance of the throne.
Even if it's just a puppet throne.
Exactly. But privately, Ahmet's sympathies lie entirely with the national movement rising in Anatolia. He knows the resistance is the only genuine hope for the survival of the Turkish people.
And this is where the historiographical breakdowns in our sources get really fascinating.
Yeah, they focus intensely on the gray area of history.
We love to look back and categorize historical figures cleanly as either visionaries or villains, but Ahmet Reşat is trapped in the gray.
What's fascinating here is that to the revolutionaries fighting in Ankara, he is the face of the Besarets's Sarayerki.
The short-sighted, incompetent palace authority.
Right, the authority that is selling out the homeland. He is literally the enemy to them.
Meanwhile, in the shadows, he is secretly funneling his own money and resources to his nephew.
His nephew, who is fighting for those very revolutionaries.
Yes. He is funding the movement that considers him a traitor. Think about the psychological weight of that.
It's unimaginable. Have you listening ever been trapped in a corporate structure or even a community where you have to be the public face of a policy you secretly despise?
All while trying to dismantle it from the inside.
Exactly. Ahmet is doing that, but the stakes are the existence of his entire nation.
He sacrifices his reputation for the future of the country, knowing full well he will be villainized by the very people he is trying to save.
It's so tragic.
And the tragic irony is truly realized at the end of the war. Following the victory of the nationalists and the abolition of the Sultanate, the new republic does exactly what Ahmet feared.
They brand him a Vatan Haini.
A traitor to the homeland.
He gets designated as one of the Yücellikler, the 150 persona non gratae. The sources spend significant time on this group.
Because they are so central to understanding the transition.
Right. These weren't just random political opponents. This was the intellectual, administrative, and aristocratic elite of the old empire.
And the new government permanently exiled them.
Forbidding them from ever returning to the newly formed republic. The honest bureaucrat is banished by the nation he quietly helped save.
It's a brutal political calculation by the new regime. The system Ahmet represented simply could not be allowed to exist within the framework of a new secular republic.
His integrity just didn't matter.
It didn't. His association with the palace made him a liability, and the academic sources point out how Kulin uses a 1924 letter from Ahmet, written from his exile in Bucharest, to bring this macro-historical trauma down to a shattering, intimate level.
That letter is so heavy. It's the ultimate Vita.
The ultimate farewell.
It completely shifts the tone of the narrative. We go from observing this grand, tense mansion to sitting alone in a cheap room in Romania, reading the words of a broken, displaced man.
It signals the permanent erasure of the Ottoman intellectual class. They weren't just defeated, they were structurally removed from the future of the country.
If we look closely at the historiographical critique of that letter, it serves as a profound testimony to the human cost of regime change.
It does. It forces the reader to confront the reality that the foundations of modern nation-states are often cemented with the exclusion and heartbreak of the old guard.
It's a very sobering thought. But the narrative doesn't just linger in the sorrow of the old guard.
No, it moves forward.
Ahmet's tragic exile is a reminder of the political cost of the revolution. But there was an equally massive, violent, and messy rebirth happening at the exact same time.
Yes.
Which brings us to the younger generation. While Ahmet represents the dying past and its tragic compromises, his nephew represents the violent, hopeful rebirth.
And specifically, the dynamic between his nephew, Kemal, and a young woman named Mehpar.
Let's get into them, because this relationship is arguably the ideological core of the novel's transition phase.
Kemal is the complete antithesis of his uncle's quiet parlor diplomacy. When we first meet Kemal, he is a veteran returning from the Sarıkamış campaign.
Now, the sources emphasize the deep cultural trauma associated with Sarıkamış. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was a national nightmare.
It really was. The sources mention the troops hauntingly referred to it as the Beyaz Gelen.
The White Bride.
The White Bride. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers froze to death in the Caucasus Mountains without even firing a shot.
To survive the Beyaz Gelen meant returning with deep physical and psychological scars. Kemal barely makes it back to the mansion alive.
And the literary analyses point out that his broken body serves as a literal walking allegory for the sick man of Europe.
He is the physical manifestation of the empire's ruin.
He is. But his trajectory doesn't end in decay. His recovery within the sanctuary of the mansion is pivotal.
And it is entirely facilitated by Mihper.
Yes, and we need to dissect Mihper's character here because she represents a very specific, fascinating socioeconomic class. She is a Circassian orphan brought into the mansion as a Beslim.
The sources spend a lot of time defining what a Beslim actually is within the Ottoman social structure. It's a concept that really doesn't map perfectly onto modern Western class ideas.
No, it doesn't at all.
She is a foster child, but she functions as a servant. She is raised alongside the family, completely immersed in their aristocratic culture, yet she is firmly, immutably on the margins.
Right. She isn't a blood relative, so she has no real status or inheritance.
But she isn't purely hired labor either. She is trapped in this weird liminal space.
She is the ultimate subaltern figure in this setting. She exists entirely to serve the structure of the household without ever truly belonging to it.
But as she nurses Kemal back to health, the rigid class barriers of the Ottoman hierarchy begin to break down.
A deeply passionate, illicit love affair ignites between them.
Which leads to a wildly scandalous, unplanned pregnancy right there in the mansion. I want to pause here and look at Kemal's reaction.
Yes, because his reaction is crucial.
Because the sources frame his next moves as this grand, ideological awakening. He recovers his health, completely rejects his uncle's passive diplomacy, and decides that armed resistance is the only way forward.
He abandons the mansion.
He leaves his pregnant lover behind and goes to join the Kuvayi Milliye, the national forces fighting in Anatolia.
And the academic texts view his departure as highly symbolic. It marks the definitive shift from imperial passivity, represented by his convalescence in the mansion, to active Republican agency.
Right. He is described as overflowing with a renewed love for the fatherland. He goes from being the sick man to the vanguard of the new nation.
That's the symbolic reading.
Hold on, though. I have to push back on this a bit.
Yeah.
Looking at it through a human lens rather than just a symbolic one.
Go ahead.
He gets a highly vulnerable, lower-class servant, pregnant in a deeply conservative aristocratic household, and then he just leaves.
To go fight. Yeah.
To go play revolutionary in the mountains.
Yeah.
By any modern metric, that sounds incredibly selfish and reckless. Do the academic sources critique Kemal for this abandonment, or do they just give him a pass because he's fighting for the Republic?
That is an excellent point of friction, and it's one the historiographical sources actively debate.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, some analyses definitely critique the gendered nature of his heroism.
Yeah.
They argue that Kemal's ability to attain ideological purity and become a martyr for the nation is entirely predicated on leaving the messy domestic consequences of his actions to the women.
Wow. That's a great point.
He gets to die a hero's death in Eskişehir, returning from the front, while Mehpar is left to face the intense social ruin of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy.
In a society that is completely unforgiving of such transgressions.
Exactly.
He survives the freezing nightmare of Sarıkamış, only to die on the way back from the front lines of the War of Independence, leaving Mehpar to deal with the fallout.
And his death proves this fundamental historical reality that the sources harp on the Kaiplar.
The massive toll of losses required to birth a republic.
The new nation is fertilized by the blood of the youth, but Mehpar's survival is just as crucial to the narrative of the new nation.
It is, and perhaps even more so from a sociological perspective. The academic sources do a deep dive into how Mehpar's pregnant body actually becomes a political site.
Yes, her pregnancy forces a massive collision of eras.
You have the strict, conservative, honor-based norms of the Ottoman aristocratic household crashing head-on into the chaotic, rule-breaking reality of the occupation and the burgeoning revolution.
The old rules literally cannot contain the reality of what is growing inside her.
That's beautifully put. And because Kemal is dead, Mehpar can no longer rely on the protective, albeit oppressive, patriarchal structure of the mansion.
She is forced to emerge from the subaltern shadows.
Through her trauma and her forced independence, she embodies the emergence of the self-reliant modern individual.
From the absolute wreckage of the old feudal class-based household, a new egalitarian working-class citizen has to forge her own identity.
Her Ayşe.
Her search for identity, yes, in the brutal light of the new republic.
I saw a detail in the historiographical notes that absolutely blew my mind regarding Mehpar.
The pseudonym.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. These are actual family secrets. The sources reveal that Mehpar is actually a pseudonym.
Ayşe Kulin had to use a fake name for this character to protect the privacy of a real-life family member.
Why would Kulin need to hide her identity if the narrative ultimately celebrates this woman's emergence as a modern, self-reliant citizen?
It speaks to the lingering power of those old societal norms. Even decades later, the shame of an out-of-wedlock pregnancy within a prominent aristocratic family carried a stigma.
A stigma that the author felt the need to protect her ancestor from.
Exactly. It proves that while the political regime changed overnight in 1923, the cultural mores regarding class, honor, and female respectability evolved much, much slower.
The pseudonym is a fascinating bridge between the liberating fiction of the novel and the restrictive reality of history.
It grounds all these sweeping political changes in undeniable, messy human reality.
It really does. How do periods of massive societal upheaval completely rewrite the rules of who we are allowed to love and who we are allowed to become?
It's a central question of the text.
And this shift in how women navigate the world transitions us perfectly to the broader cultural revolution taking place entirely within the home.
The sources map the changing roles of Turkish women incredibly meticulously through the different inhabitants of the mansion.
Let's go through them. The novel uses the female characters as a living timeline of cultural evolution. If we start at the top of the hierarchy, we have Saray Lahane.
The sources describe her as the ultimate guardian of Geleneksel Odorite, or traditional authority.
She is the conservative elder, fiercely protective of the unyielding Ottoman court culture and hierarchy.
She is the internal policing force of the house.
When she discovers Maypari's pregnancy, her reaction is ruthless. She isn't concerned with the birth of a new nation.
No, she is concerned with managing the scandal to protect the family's aristocratic honor.
She tries to arrange a marriage that bridges the social gap just enough to hide the shame while maintaining propriety. She is desperately trying to enforce the rules of a world that has already collapsed outside her windows.
She is the anchor to the past.
But then we look at the next generation down, to Bahis, Ahmet Reşat's wife.
The academic analyses highlight a very specific, telling moment for Bahis. It's the scene where she gasps Iva.
Alas.
Alas, yes, upon hearing the news that Damat Ferit Pasha has returned to power as Grand Vizier.
Let's explain the significance of that gasp to the listener, because Damat Ferit Pasha isn't just a random politician.
Far from it.
His return was a massive geopolitical threat to the national movement. He was seen as highly sympathetic to the occupying Allied forces and actively hostile to the revolutionaries in Anatolia.
Exactly. And Bahis's gasp demonstrates a profound political consciousness.
She isn't just worried about the price of bread or the gossip in the parlor.
She intimately understands the macro-level threats to the nation's survival. She bridges the gap between the secluded private domestic sphere and the turbulent public national politics.
The sources view her as a transitional figure. She is still bound by her role as a minister's wife, but she is an active partner in the political discourse of the era.
She is reading the room of the entire nation.
And then, taking it to the final stage of this evolution, we have Azra.
Azra is an educated, widowed friend of the family.
And the sources categorize her as the archetype of the fully modern woman. She isn't just observing the politics like Bahis.
No, she actively and consciously supports the national movement.
She helps build the new republic.
Azra represents the realization of the Republican ideal for women. The socio-political texts argue that the true revolution in Turkey wasn't merely the military victory over the occupying forces.
Right.
It was a profound cultural shift that fundamentally altered the fabric of society, known as the Safsataşma Çabaları.
The modernization efforts.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that shift didn't start with declarations in Parliament.
It began in the living rooms of women like Azra, who took on active public roles in rebuilding the country.
The transition of women from the private sphere to public political consciousness is a cornerstone of the Republican ideal.
It's a literal timeline of modernization living under one roof. Saray Lanhanım is yesterday, fiercely guarding a dead empire.
Bahis is today, awake to the political reality, but still anchored to the old structures.
And Azra is tomorrow, educated, independent, and ready to roll up her sleeves and build a republic.
It illustrates that the death of the empire wasn't just a change in borders or flags. It was a fundamental renegotiation of identity, particularly for women.
Moving from the secluded space into the glaring light of public civic duty. Consider how political conversations in your own family reflect the changing values of different generations under the same roof.
It's the same dynamic.
The macro-level history of a nation is always written in the micro-level arguments at the family dinner table.
Which is a perfect segue into the historiography of the novel itself.
Right, we need to examine Ayşe Kulin's specific methodology and the intense academic debate it sparked.
The debate regarding pop history versus lived reality.
Because the background of the author is honestly just as fascinating as the plot. Kulin isn't some detached academic researching the 1920s from a dusty archive.
No, she is deeply connected to it.
She is the actual great-granddaughter of Ahmet Reşat Yediz, the real-life inspiration for the honest bureaucrat Ahmet Reşat Bey.
The Minister of Finance who was exiled to Bucharest.
Yes. She is also the granddaughter of Liman Hanım, another key figure in this extended family saga.
Her direct lineage gives her unprecedented access to the Isle Soya Saka,
The family tree.
along with generations of private anecdotes, oral histories, and deeply personal letters.
The characters populating this mansion aren't just historical archetypes drawn from textbooks. She shares blood with them.
The tragic figure of Kemal, who dies in the snows of the War of Independence, is based on her father's uncle.
You can really feel that intimate connection in her prose. The literary sources highlight her use of highly evocative imagery.
There's a powerful car, Bitim Lamezi, a description of snow, right at the opening of the novel.
Oh, that metaphor is brilliant. She describes the winter snow covering the thick, filthy mud of Istanbul like powdered sugar.
It's this delicate, beautiful veneer, desperately trying to hide a city that is fundamentally rotting from within under the weight of occupation.
It's a poetic, visceral way to capture the illusion of the late Ottoman period. However, this highly emotional, character-driven approach to major historical events has sparked a significant debate in academic circles.
It certainly has. Several prominent academic critics, such as the essayist Enes Batur, have labeled the novel as pop-tari.
Pop history. I noticed the academics were really throwing shade in the sources. Why is pop history used as such a derogatory term here?
Well, the primary academic critique is that works like Veda take incredibly complex, multifaceted historical realities like the economic collapse of an empire or the geopolitical nuances of the Treaty of Sèvres and strip them of their true historical weight.
To make them easily consumable for a mass audience.
Exactly. They argue it reduces profound national trauma to melodrama, replacing the rigorous resmi ve keskin uslub, the official, sharp, objective style of state historiography, with illicit parlor romances and emotional manipulation.
But isn't that official state historiography exactly what alienates everyday people from their own history?
That is the counter-argument, yes.
I have to side with the defenders of the book here. How can you genuinely understand the impact of the Sarıkamış campaign if you only read troop movement statistics?
You can't grasp the full human picture.
You need to understand the grief of the women waiting in the mansions. The sources mention the Samiyet, the deep sincerity of Kuzlin's epistolary format. The letters.
Because she is writing about her own ancestors, she bridges the massive alienating gap between cold official history and bleeding emotional reality.
And many sociologists in our sources argue that this dominance of individual narratives is a necessary and vital corrective to state history.
Official history often flattens the human experience to serve a clean, nationalistic narrative. Kulin's work operates as a yada kugu yada kashek.
A half-fiction, half-reality masterpiece.
It doesn't claim to be a peer-reviewed historical journal. Its immense power lies in making the terrifying transition from empire to republic a tangible reality.
It validates the ancestral memories of displacement, fear, and survival that ordinary families carry. Which is exactly why it was a blockbuster.
It resonated deeply.
It's why she won Writer of the Year from the Writers' Union of Turkey in 2007. The public doesn't want to just memorize the dates of treaties.
They want to know how the people who lived through those treaties felt when they woke up in the morning.
They want the family secrets, the messy human element. And the public's insatiable hunger for that messy human element brings us to the final section of our analysis.
The life of the narrative beyond the page.
The impact of Veda led to multiple adaptations across different mediums, providing a fascinating case study in how we consume historical trauma.
Some of these adaptations were triumphant, while others failed spectacularly.
Let's start with the sheer scale of the book's success. It has gone through nearly 100 printings in Turkey alone.
It clearly struck a massive universal chord.
Evidenced by its international translations into English, Dutch, Greek, Serbian, and Azerbaijani. But the journey to other mediums was incredibly bumpy.
Very bumpy. Let's dissect the 2012 television adaptation.
The sources say this was highly anticipated, right?
It was a massive production. Produced by Medyapım, it featured a high-profile, star-studded cast, including Mehmet Aslantu and Furi Evşen.
That's a huge deal.
They spared no expense. It was primed to be a national television event, yet it became a notorious rewriting kurbanya.
A victim of ratings.
It was abruptly and unceremoniously canceled after only 8 episodes.
8 episodes for a book that had 100 print runs. How did a production with that much pedigree tank so completely?
The sources pinpoint a few critical structural missteps. First, the producers inexplicably changed the main character's name from Ahmet Reshat to Mehmet Ret.
Wait, why would they do that? That seems like such an unnecessary change that would instantly alienate the core fan base.
It absolutely alienated them. Fans felt the authenticity of the historical and familial record was being tampered with for no reason.
What a bizarre choice.
But more fundamentally, the failure came down to the medium of network television itself.
How so?
TV audiences demand fast-paced action, high melodrama, and conventional sweeping romance arcs. The nuanced, slow-burn tragedy of an honest bureaucrat agonizing over his moral duty.
And the suffocating atmospheric claustrophobia of a mansion under siege.
Right. That kind of Durinlik or psychological depth is incredibly difficult to sustain week after week on network TV without fundamentally altering the soul of the story.
They likely tried to force this delicate historical tragedy into the mold of a standard soap opera, and in doing so, they lost the very essence that made the book special.
It seems that way.
But it's fascinating to contrast that massive television failure with the incredible success of the 2023 theatrical adaptation.
Yes. Directed by Nedim Saban, the stage play was specifically commissioned to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the Turkish Republic.
And it was an absolute hit.
The stage proved to be the perfect natural medium for Veda.
Why did it work so much better on stage than on screen?
Because the theater inherently excels at creating claustrophobia. You are forced to watch the characters trapped within the physical dimensions of the stage.
Which perfectly mimics the Isashihara dynamic within the mansion walls.
Exactly. The audience can focus entirely on the internal lives of the characters without the expectation of sweeping cinematic action sequences.
The sources also rave about the casting, particularly Nevra Sarizli's portrayal of the Delhi Sarli.
A mad palace lady.
She apparently became this iconic, tragicomic symbol of the fading grandeur of the Ottoman elite. And there's a deeply moving quote in the sources from Aziz Sarvan.
The actor who played Ahmet Reshat in the 2023 production.
Yes. Sarvan spoke openly about the immense sorumluluk, the crushing responsibility of his role.
He wasn't just playing a fictional protagonist. He was tasked with embodying the literal ancestor of the author, who was likely sitting in the audience.
He was carrying the weight of a specific family's trauma, and by extension, the historical trauma of an entire exiled class under the stage lights every night.
That adds such a profound layer of gravity to the performance.
It really does, and it shows just how malleable and enduring this story is. The sources even mention that Veda was adapted into a graphic novel.
Yes, for quick consumption by younger audiences.
They segmented the dense historical text, streamlined the complex political narratives, and formatted it with illustrations.
Which is a crucial sociological point. Whether it's a 600-page dense novel, a tense stage play, or a vibrant graphic novel, there is a recognized ongoing cultural necessity to keep this narrative alive.
So what does this all mean for us today? They are actively formatting ancestral memory into comic books to ensure that Gen Z doesn't forget.
Doesn't forget the incredible sacrifices, the agonizing moral compromises, and the immense complexity of their nation's birth.
It really is a masterclass in keeping history relevant. Which brings us to the end of this incredible deep dive.
It's been quite the journey.
Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked from these sources today. The title of the book, Veda Farewell, takes on so many heavy layered meanings by the end of this analysis.
It really does. On the surface, it's the literal farewell letter from Ahmet Reshat in his Romanian exile.
But as our sources have illuminated, it is vastly more than a single letter. It is a collective farewell to a massive empire that dictated the geopolitics of the world for 6 centuries.
It is a farewell to an aristocratic palatial lifestyle that evaporated overnight into poverty and obscurity.
It is a farewell to the relative innocence of a city before the brutal realities of foreign occupation.
And most deeply, it is a farewell to a specific vision of self and identity that simply could not survive the violent, necessary transition to modernity.
Ayşe Kulin manages to take the grand, stark historical labels we read in textbooks, words like treason, liberation, occupation, and republic, and she violently humanizes them.
In the pages of Veda, treason isn't an abstract legal concept. It's an honest, broken man crying over a treaty in his study.
Liberation isn't just a flag waving, it's a young man freezing to death in the snow, and a young subaltern woman forced to raise a child in the ashes of the old world.
The modern republic was built on the foundation of these agonizing, deeply personal farewells.
The story humanizes the stark historical labels. It forces us to look past the dates in the treaties and recognize the shared, messy human trauma that births any new era.
And as we wrap up our analysis of these sources, I think this leaves us with a profound final thought.
A provocative thought for you listening to explore on your own.
If our modern nations are built on the unresolved traumas and farewells of our ancestors, what aspects of the old world are we currently saying goodbye to in our own lives without even realizing it?
Wow. That is a heavy, incredible thought to sit with on your drive. Are we the onyx bureaucrats trying desperately to hold on to a feeling system, or are we the revolutionaries walking into the freezing snow to build something new? That's all from us for now. If there are books you wish you could listen to a summary of, don't forget to write them in the comments. Maybe our next content will be the book you suggested. Stay healthy and happy.